The AMCA program to develop a twin-engine stealth fighter is expected to cost $1.8 billion and take 10 years to develop. For the first time, bidding will also be open to India's private companies independently or jointly with foreign firms. Previously, contracts always went to state-run Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. In a bid to turn India into a defence industrial powerhouse, Delhi has established 2 dedicated defence industrial corridors in Uttar Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. These corridors have attracted investments and signed 250 MOUs worth millions of dollars as of February this year. Spread across 11 locations in both states, these hubs provide infrastructure and incentives to encourage growth. Sana, let me ask you first. So what kind of impact do you believe opening up this contract for the first time to the private sector will have on India's industrial defence industrial base?
I think this is very important. I think we really need to start this public-private partnership when it comes to in defence complex. And I think it is definitely going to be a game changer in a way that it signals towards a decisive pivot in India's defence industrial strategy. It is absolutely going to make India less dependent on Russia. Its import dependencies is going to be reduced. Then it is also going to project India as the net security provider in the region, as well as a country that is going to import weapons and defense system to other countries. And we are in this Indo-Pacific region where there's a need for cheaper and perhaps better weapons than what Chinese are providing. Then I think it is also going to enhance performance-driven ecosystem. And also, I think in terms of technology transfer, when there is going to be joint venture with the companies from France, US, and other Western, Eastern European countries, I do believe that it is absolutely going to enhance and change the game when it comes to India in the industrial defense complex.
And Tony, I want to tap into your experience. You've worked for Raytheon, obviously for US Department of Defense. You've seen the rise of the South Korea's defense sector over the past decades. What do you think has been the key to India's success?
There's several. First of all, India has been very smart about seeking foreign technology transfer to enhance its domestic defense production, from the manufacturing of the Russian MiG fighters to the British Jaguar jets and Hawk aircraft to the French-Spanish Scorpion submarines. Now India is building its own submarines, and of course the very successful Indo-Russian BrahMos missiles. These all strengthen India's domestic defense industry. I think the secrets of its success, however, is the highly educated and capable engineers and workforce that India has. And I had an opportunity to visit the India Aircraft Research and Design Center, ARDC, in Bangalore a few years ago, and I was very impressed with their abilities. So I believe that's a secret weapon. However, if I may, there's a hindrance, I believe, to the growth of India's defense industry. That is India's large bureaucracy. The project sometimes takes a long time to get approval. Then there are other administrative requirements which slows down the progress of India's domestic defense industry.
Right. Sana, are there any moves to try to streamline this, to try to cut through this bureaucracy?
I think that's a problem that's very, very difficult for India to counter, and this is something that we have been dealing for a very long time. But I think that there is definitely a promise, like, for example, Make in India initiative and PLI. It's also for defense industry as well, production linked initiative. So I think this government has absolutely put in effort and introduced a number of schemes and initiatives. And I do believe that eventually this is definitely something that we would be able to address in the long run.
And Tony, just reflecting now on Taiwan. So we've seen India essentially go from import dependence in terms of arms to indigenous production and then global exports. Taiwan also has, a strong defense industrial complex. How does it compare?
Well, Taiwan also has a very well-educated and highly capable workforce. I think that the limitation is the size of the requirement. India is huge, so they can sustain a large defense industry. When you design and build an aircraft, you basically have the same R&D process. But if that R&D process ends up, in the case of MCA, when it starts being in production, India might buy 200, 300 aircraft. Where for Taiwan, for example, the recent T5 Brave Eagle, Taiwan designer produced it, and the requirement was 66. So it's the same type of effort for a very small requirement. So the production for the for the India AMCA might be 7-10 years, where this Brave Eagle is only 2-3 years. And the follow-on support, the parts, the spare parts and all that also allows your defense industry to grow. But if that requirement is for 66 aircraft versus 200, then that in itself is difficult for the defense industry to sustain itself. That's the problem with Taiwan.
Yeah, and so those economies of scale need to kick in. And presumably for Taiwan, therefore, it would be global exports, which is what India has done. What appetite do you think there could be for Taiwan to have global markets, for global customers to be buying from Taiwan? How about India?
I think India is absolutely looking at regional countries, and not just to, and also to perhaps sell its own weapon rather than getting it from any, because I don't think that in the region apart from, I don't really see any other country apart from Russia where it could really make its need met. But I think I would definitely add what Tony has said, that for Taiwan and India, threat perception and the level of threat is very, very different. For Taiwan, it's about survival. But for India, it's about power projection, protecting its sovereignty, and to some extent, strategic autonomy. But I do believe that Taiwan has absolutely done a great job with respect to developing its own indigenous submarines. But I feel that with respect to both India and Taiwan, both are now realizing, of course, hard lessons had to be learned, but then dependency is actually vulnerability. And developing its own capabilities is something that is at the front line of national security.
Tony, let's go back to India's Air Force. There were General Electric engine delays. Delays on engine supplies, and these have impacted India's Air Force. I understand India's Teja Mark 1A version. They've been trying to replace the aging fleet, essentially, but there should be some good news on the horizon where we talk about the co-production, isn't it, that India is doing. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, of course. From the lessons learned from Teja, it's important to have a production-ready engine for the next generation fighter, AMCA. So I think this type of agreement, plus the closer collaboration between the United States and India, we should see a better technology transfer and approval for technology transfer for the production of the more advanced engine in India. So I believe for India's next generation fighter, the situation will be much better than the light combat aircraft LCA.
Yeah, and also again, just to tap into your military experience, how important is the engine for the fighter?
It's super important because it drives the entire performance. So the next generation fighter, there ought to be an engine that can be adjust for the environmental requirements. For example, this next generation engine ought to have the ability to provide good fuel efficiency when it's cruising, but provide the power when it's doing air combat. Now, right now, there is a digital electric engine management system in most of the jet engines now, but the next generation engine needs to have another step higher than that. And also the next generation engine need to have the ability to reduce its heat signature, because if you look at the current stealth fighter, stealth fighter is only stealth from radar signatures. You still have a huge heat signature. There's only 2 aircraft right now that the United States have that can reduce the heat signature. So the next generation engine ought to be having that kind of capability to reduce its heat signature so that it can remain stealthy in the infrared spectrum. And also, the engine ought to have the ability to allow the aircraft to go supersonic without afterburner, because right now most fighter, they have to put the engine afterburner, which uses a lot of gas and a lot of heat signature to go supersonic. There's only about a handful of aircraft right now can do supercruise, such as F-22 and the advanced Eurofighters. So these are the characteristics that the engine needs to be ready to go when India's next generation fighter comes online to help. You can design in these capabilities to take advantage of the engine.
And Sana, there's something even more advanced, which is apparently part of AMCA Mark II, which is the 6th generation engine. But what we understand is that the government has been a little bit reluctant to talk about 6th generation before fully progressing, I guess, on the fifth generation. Is that something that you've picked up on too?
I think this has been India's policy. I think talking too early and too fast, too much, without acquiring the capabilities is something that is going to have repercussions, both domestically as well as globally. So, and also we have seen in the past that a lot of deals haven't really come through. So I think the idea is that perhaps to get it first and then perhaps just to show more and talk less. This is something that has been India's policy.